So who here in the audience are currently working on PCI version 4 implementations or planning your first PCI assessment? Hands up if you're currently working on that. There's a good few of you here. That's good, because I'm happy to tell you you are in the right place. Unlike the earlier panel where the hands didn't come up, this is the place to be. And we're really excited about this panel because we really have this unique opportunity today now to hear from representatives from 3 important global organizations who are in the same position as you and are here to share their experiences with their implementations of PCI version 4. So we'll get started with some quick introductions, and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with you, Gilbert.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gilbert. I'm from LGMS Malaysia, based in Malaysia. Myself is PCI QSA. We also do PCI ASV for more than 10 years. We do security penetration testing. We do security consulting and auditing, and digital forensic and cybersecurity incident response as well. Yeah.
Great.
Hey everyone, my name is David Owoeye, and I lead Afterpay's governance, risk, and compliance team. For those that might not know Afterpay, it's one of the services within Block's ecosystem, alongside with Square and Cash App and Tidal. My team is based in Sydney and Melbourne in Australia, and we focus on a lot of things across governance, risk, and compliance, and specifically across compliance efforts, such as PCI, ISO, and SOC 2.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rishi, and I'm part of Concentrix, and I'm based in India, and I'm representing the service provider side. We are a company totally purely based on customer care and customer experience, and I lead the GRCC function, cybersecurity engineering, and cyber defense monitoring. Thank you.
Great. Well, now we know who we have up here. Let's start with grilling them with some questions. To kick off, I'm going to ask you each to share what were some of your first impressions as you started implementing PCI version 4. And Gilbert, I'll start with you again, and then just let the other panelists join as they go along.
Sure. I think from consultancy firm point of view, we have seen a lot of type of industries that approach the PCI DSS differently. Mm-hmm. So the plan on how they have started up with the roadmap, whether do they start with the proper procedures even before they go for implementations, they start out with different type of styles. So at the end of the day, we even seen some cases whereby the standards they may not that familiar with. Mm-hmm. So that will be usually a challenges. When the planning is wrong at the very early stage, it will take up a lot of resources and efforts until the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think from our point of view, we're quite excited about the changes that involve the customized approach. Mm. That was an area where we saw what we'd been asking for and sort of talking to our QSAs about and PCI in general about, in a way where we're able to bring the way we manage security using a risk-based approach to sort of showcase how we're meeting those requirements. So that being introduced into 4.0 was very exciting. And also a lot of emphasis around how there is requirement to focus on those requirements as a BAU activity as opposed to a point-in-time activity. So that's an area that I feel would really help people looking to implement PCI 4.0.
Right.
So initial reaction when risk-based approach was introduced, I was a little disappointed, because when you introduce something like a risk-based approach, you leave the onus to us. And I was very happy with the PCI standard 3.2.1, where everything was very prescribed that you need to do. But looking at the changing threat landscape, you may have to release a standard every 15 days. So it is the requirement of the day that you implement a risk-based approach, because the risk is ever evolving. I really like the way that you still provide the overall governance, but leave some flexibility with the customized approach to the end customer or consumer, merchant, or a service provider. And what I really liked about is the roles and responsibility metrics of each requirement, because suddenly people do not look at security as the ultimate owner of the standard, because everybody is now the custodian of the standard. And internally, I provide governance, and SSC provides the overall governance.
That's great. And there is obviously all of that new aspect of version 4 with the 2 different approaches. I'm going to stick with you, Rishi, for this next one as well, and hear a little bit more about your experiences Specifically, as you were preparing for the first assessment, what did you actually do to help you prepare for that assessment?
So really, first step was to look at the summary of changes very, very carefully, right? What is really change? Then look at the scope that you operate in, how those changes apply in your environment, because every environment is very different. Then obviously form a team that who's going to do what, perform a gap analysis, and then execute. I think that's the structure approach that we took on PCI DSS 4.0. It worked for us, and I'm sure it can work for everyone with a little bit minor tweaks.
Yeah, and David,
Yeah,
what was...
that's absolutely right. So one of the things that we did first was the gap assessment, right? We compared the previous standard to the 4.0 and see what has changed and what does that mean for our organization. And part of that gap assessment sort of related to a couple of very targeted risk assessments to sort of say, there's a new requirement. Do we currently do it? Do we currently meet the intent of this requirement? Do we have the controls in place that might not be described as part of the descriptive requirements and controls, but do we do it in a different way? So that sort of gives us a very good understanding of how much work we had to do up front, how much new controls we have to put in place versus what we already had in place that could meet a customized approach. So that was part of the work that we did at the start and sort of set us up for success in the way we implemented.
Right. I think the gap assessment or the gap analysis is very crucial because it's not just allow the company or the technical department to understand what sort of controls they need to implement, but from management point of view, it is also, we are talking about a journey because PCI DSS is supposed to be a standard that benefits the company in long term when it comes to cybersecurity implementation. So by having a very proper gap analysis done at the very first stage, resources like time, duration, effort, people, processes, technology that you're going to invest, it will give the management a very good visibility on that part.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that about doing the gap analysis first, because I did actually want to dive a little bit deeper into the preparation and see, with all the things that you do to prepare, what did you feel was the most important thing to do first or really early in the process? And it sounds like gap assessment was one of them, but I'm curious as well if there's anything else that you felt was really important to do up front as you prepared. So David, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Yeah. For us, it was communication. I thought that was the biggest thing we had to do. Once we saw the standard and we did a very quick deep dive to sort of see what it meant with a very little team, we knew right up front we had to communicate with our stakeholders. We had to communicate with the business to let them know what was coming. Yes, we know PCI is a very strong standard that we can use to sort of, to use the word, strong arm and get a lot of work done because it's very required for the business to operate. But at the same time, being a very mature organization means you're able to communicate all the needs and tell the engineers and the product teams and the business decision makers all the things that are coming up front. So we set up a very good communication strategy around it to sort of inform them about all the various things that we need to consider and what that timeline looked like. And that sort of helps us in those different stage gates when we get there.
Yeah, and Rishi, how about you?
Yeah, so post the communication is done, and this is the bare minimum that we have to do, right? We had to come up with the RACI metrics wherein who will do what, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consultant, who's informed. So we created a detailed RACI metrics, which is not only the requirement of 4.0, which helped us meet that requirement, but also helped us drive that compliance internally, because everybody was familiar that I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. This has changed, this has changed, this has changed. So this is an extra effort that I need to put in. So that really helped us in getting this through.
Right. I think other than that, communication is definitely important. It's also another highlights that I would like to mention here is know who you work with, because on top of internal departments that you're going to work and communicating internally, the external parties that you may engage, are these the person that's coming from the industry that know exactly what is cybersecurity, they know what is PCI DSS, because that would really ease or smoothen the entire journey while you interpret how we're going to implement the standards. Again, it's a journey.
Yeah, so there's definitely a few common themes I'm hearing about the preparation. Communication is key, both internally and with your external business partners, the professionals that you work with, and having that understanding of what's changed. And as we've said, a lot has changed in PCI DSS between version 3.2.1 and version 4, both in the types of requirements changes and also the actual methods of implementation that are there. One of those obviously being customized approach, which I think for a lot of people is a bit of a learning curve, and we've mentioned it a couple of times already. So I'm just kind of curious, are you yourselves either seeing a lot of your customers implement it or yourselves looking to use the customized approach, or are you tending to see more of a trend to stay to defined approach? So what are your thoughts on that one? And Gilbert, I'll stick with you on that one.
Right. I think from technical perspective or from practical perspective, either approach are fine. As long as it is a practical implementation, the value of the controls is it works in that situation or in that particular business nature. I think like what Rishi mentioned, every companies run differently. Probably they are from the same industry, but how they design their architecture, the business flow is pretty unique in that sense. So with that case, when a certain controls or requirement that they're going to interpret how they should implement, regardless which approach, as long as practical, is something that is doable and is benefits in terms of what I call that ROI. Definitely, it will turn back into the actual benefits of the cybersecurity.
Yeah. I mean, we always embrace the idea of that customized approach. So a hybrid approach where we look at the detailed recommendations, list of controls, and also that customized approach where we're able to say, hey, this is our risk management framework, this is our control landscape. There's areas where we can have a combined control that actually meets the spirit of what the requirements are saying. So yes, there is going to be a bit of upfront work that's going to be required because you have to document that slightly differently to be able to meet that requirement. But I think if you start thinking about security as a journey and a maturity exercise, you start wanting to invest a bit more. So documenting our control is the bare minimum, right? Because you're saying this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And next year, when you come to assess us based on it, we should either be doing this at a bare minimum or doing it better. So that upfront work, yes, might be a little bit more work, but it's something that we tend to embrace because we're looking to get more mature and turn all these things that we do into a BAU activity, as opposed to just a point-in-time exercise where there's a list of things we have to do because we want to pass it PCI. But embracing the true nature of PCI, which is to improve on your security posture and the way you operate as a business. So that hybrid approach, because some of the defined controls are just stock standard. They're great, they're perfect, they've been tried and tested, so we will continue to do those. But there'll be areas where there's a bit of, we're trying to innovate as a business, so technology, we're going bleeding edge, so there's going to be things that would not speak directly to that technology, so that's where we'll be looking at our customized approach. So that's the way we're thinking about it, so a hybrid model.
So customized approach, I think, provides you the flexibility. So most of the times when you are on the other side, you are being audited, the normal complaint is that auditor is going by the book, right? This approach gives you that flexibility. It's not just the book, how you are meeting the requirement. And I understand when council looks at the standard, you have to cater to all organization of a small size to a largest possible size, right? So this helps, I would say, two organizations a lot. Organizations which are very small in size, which are meeting the requirements, may not have the same what is written in the standard. And then there are large organizations who are exceeding the requirements, but somehow does not match the standard, right? So how many times I think people in the room would have had a struggle that I have implemented passwordless. Oh, passwordless is not there in the PCI, right? I need to have these many strength of the password. So I think that it provides that flexibility, increases the security controls posture, and also helps the organization to meet the compliance requirements, but not going by the book. I think that is the real key of the customized approach, I would say.
Yeah, I think from what we're hearing is similar to some of the things that you were saying, is that for a lot of organizations, they're using customized approach in certain areas of the standard for certain requirements, but they're still finding the defined approach meets a lot of their needs for a lot of the other requirements as well. So I'll be interested to see how that shifts over time as more and more implementations get complete and more organizations have their version 4 transition completed. So it's definitely interesting to see how that's working. Let's move on to our next question. This is going to be a challenging one because I'm going to ask you about challenges. During any implementation, there's often, sometimes you come across things that you weren't expecting perhaps, or something that was unforeseen as far as what might delay an implementation or make you need to change how you think about implementing a new control or a new security part for your organization. With PCI-DSS, because there are a lot of changes, I'd like to get your thoughts on any particular challenges that you've come across as you are implementing or planning to implement, or change from 3.2.1 to version 4, and more importantly, how you were able to work around those, or how you were able to resolve those challenges. Because obviously a lot of people may come across similar challenges, and sort of understanding how to solve them and work around them is going to be very beneficial. Don't touch the microphone. So think about some challenges and how you're able to solve them. So Gilbert, do you have any thoughts you can share on that one?
Yeah, I think on top of the gap analysis that we have talked about before the implementation, so the during implementation is one of the common scenarios that we always seen here is that surprises continue to come along the journey. So when surprises come here, that means that there are some requirement that wasn't being identified properly during the gap analysis, and it pop up. Of course, there's no 100% bulletproof that we can do everything during the gap analysis. So these are the surprises that we need to manage together with the customers, because at the end of the day, they do have some business decision that has been made. Example, like the compliance that have to be achieved in 6 months time or in 12 months time, and how do we resolve that? So these are the surprises that usually will pop up, and usually it may involve a mixture of involvement from people. Maybe last minute they need to engage an external party. Last minute they need to purchase certain solution in order to speed up the processes. So these are the very common challenges that we usually observe.
Yeah, I like the word you used there, Gilbert, like the surprises, because you go in thinking you already know what to expect when you're doing this assessment. So what we normally do internally is we don't see it only as a compliance effort. We see it as an opportunity, again, to review our security posture. So what that allows us to do is give ourselves a bit more time throughout the whole planning process and the execution process. So when surprises pop up, we sort of have a bit more time to work on it. So I'll give an internal scenario example where one of the things that we try to do, where we've got Afterpay, which is what I look after, which is a service within Block, but we've also got Square, who has a PCI DSS program. And we've also got Cash App, seamless thing. What we try to do is make sure we've got a centralized control framework that not just only speaks to any one of those services, but also speaks to all three of them. And we try and keep a very consistent language, because if we've just done one for Square and we're telling the QSA something slightly different, it starts to tell a very different narrative. So we look at it as an opportunity to sort of consolidate and do a refresh and say, hey, let's go back to our controls framework. These are the specific controls that we have in place that meets these requirements that pertain to PCI, and sort of assess ourselves based on that, give ourselves enough time to do an uplift and implement additional controls or fix issues that we find, whether it's through our pen test or whatever it might be, and then fix those internally first, and then present those as evidences to the QSAs. So those surprises always pop up. We just have to give ourselves a bit more time.
I love how you both refer to them as surprises. I think that's a lovely way to talk about it. Rishi, how about you? Any surprises that you came across and how you resolved them?
So I think when you're a large organization and you are already under different compliance frameworks, you would see that any transition, you would be almost there, right? When you talk about MFA, phishing simulations, phishing test, password strength, passwordless, whatever, you're almost there. But as you said, right, you'll always have a surprise. And then you need to figure out a way that how will you meet that requirement in how much time? And when you have a scale of 400,000 workstations across the globe, suddenly one requirement is out of the box. For example, for me, from an unauth scan to an authenticated scan, which means that your vulnerabilities from 6 will go to 60, right? And now you will have the visibility, now you have to fix it. But at the same time, I always wanted to do that, right? Because if you look at mean time to patch 400,000 machines, and mean time to exploit is getting shorter and shorter. And suddenly compliance helps. And I always tell that do your security well, and compliance may be the outcome of that. And compliance always help you get the budgets, because you're meeting the industry requirements or your customer requirements, and that helps you improve the security a bit. So for me, one requirement which stood out was from unauth to auth scan, especially on the workstation side, because we were always doing the server and the network part of it. But on the workstation side, that is a big leap, and I'm taking the leeway of the grace period to get that done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I like what you mentioned there. Like, compliance is such a very good tool.
Yeah.
The way we looked at 4.0 is this is a laundry list of things that we've always wanted to do.
Absolutely.
But, you know, there's always going to be pushback with engineering, with products, with, you know, the teams that work on the various services. But this gives us an opportunity as security teams and experts to say, hey, this was one of the advices that we had right off the bat. It's come to the industry.
Right.
It's become a bare minimum. And it gives us an opportunity to implement some of those. So it's usually a very, very good opportunity to sort of, you know, it's like a Christmas laundry list of things that you've always wanted to do, and now you have the opportunity to do it. So that's how we look at it.
I wonder how many people are wishing for PCI version 4 for Christmas in their Christmas wish list.
If they're waiting for budget.
Yes, and you've obviously, the experiences you have, you know, obviously they reflect very different environments. You know, you each are working with different environments and seeing different environments, different ways of implementing across different business units or departments and scale, different levels of scale as well. And while every environment, you know, is going to be very different from the next one, I think some of the learnings that you receive or that you get from those experiences, from those surprises, can certainly be applied to, you know, many other situations, even if the environments themselves are quite different. And that's why, you know, we love having these sessions so that we can, you know, hear experiences from different people, different environments, different organizations, so that, you know, everyone can gain some benefit from hearing those experiences. So if we wanted to think about the sort of one key takeaway or one, you know, really important learning that you feel you would like, you know, this audience here to take away with them from the panel today, what would that one be? And I'm actually going to start in reverse for this time. So I'm going to start with you, Rishi, there at the end. And ask you each just to provide one key one.
I mean, a part of it is covered, right? If you want to start, obviously communication is very important. That is the key. Make your stakeholders aware. Second is, I would say, create a RACI matrix, who's doing what. And why I say that create a RACI matrix, because you're already working towards 4.0 already, because that's a requirement of a 4.0. And then create a plan, do a gap analysis, and go for it. I think that's the key. I think that how I can summarize your journey to 4.0.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. I think the way we always think about it is the BAU, right? Most of these activities that we are looking to implement, a certain team will have to be executing it. So that communication up front with them to understand why, and for them to be able to do it after that point in time when they get audited, it's what's most key. You know, that continuous activity, continuous monitoring, continuous progress. And that only happens through education and communication with them to understand the real reason behind it, so that they can actually perform those activities going forward, so that when you come back in a years from now, you're either at least where you were or better. So that mindset of having those relevant activities as BAU activities is pretty key up front.
And
Yeah, I
Gilbert?
think to add on the BAU, I think the key take from my point of view is definitely a detailed planning. Allow me to chunk down a little bit on what is this detailed planning here, is that knowing who are the one that you work with, internal, who are the stakeholders, who is the card owners in your companies, who are the one that processing your card data, and who is the third party that you work with that your card data may flows to. And other than that is also a planning as in like the consultant that you're going to work with, be it your penetration testers, your security auditors. Are these people having the know-how in delivering the benefits of cybersecurity to you? Because at the end of the day, when you got compliant, there's also the part of the journey as it will blend into your BAU. It will be a long-term thing that we will have to commit and respond from time to time.
Yeah, and that's a great note, I think, to sort of wrap up the discussion on, because some of the key themes that we've heard throughout this include the detailed planning, the importance of that planning, and that includes really understanding your environment as it is now, so that you can then understand what you may need to change or evolve between the two versions of the standard, and also, just as importantly, what you may not need to change. You might already have things in your environment that meet version 4 that maybe weren't specifically called out in version 3.2.1, so you already have them there, but you can now build them into, you know, your PCI DSS documentation and those processes.
Have QSA as your trusted advisor all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, just don't call QSA when your audits are due. at the end of the year, and no, don't make PCI as an anniversary, right? The compliance has to be throughout the year. Auditor is just coming and validating those controls, and if there is any change of scope, you want clarification, QSA is your trusted advisor, because I think he sees more environments than us, so he can always provide those inputs that you're doing this right, you're not doing this right. So I think that's one tip I would give.
Yes, trusting, as you say, having trusted business partners and trusted assessors, a relationship with PCI, qualified individuals, both your external assessors, your QSAs, we also have the ASVs as well to help with the vulnerability scans, but also internally. A lot of organizations find benefit in having ISAs, the internal security assessors, the PCIP, the PCI professional, is another training qualification that organizations can use to get their teams up to speed and meet that education piece that you were referring to, making sure that everyone's aware of their roles and responsibilities, again, another important aspect, and also how to apply DSS version 4 to their environment in a way that makes sense for their business. And all of these qualifications have all been updated with version 4 information. So if you do have PCIPs or ISAs, make sure they've taken that updated training, because it will certainly help with the transition. And the other place to get information and trusted partners is obviously right here. I mean, if you look around you, this is the perfect place to have that conversation. And I certainly encourage you to make the most of the time here today and tomorrow. Our panelists here are going to be here for the full duration of the conference, and they assure me that they're more than happy for you all to come and find them during the breaks and go and see them out in the vendor showcase when we're over the lunch or the afternoon break, and tomorrow as well. More than happy to share more of their experiences, and also just with each other as well. We have a lot of organizations, a lot of different types of organizations represented here. We have assessors, we have merchants, we have implementers, we have the vendors and the solution providers. So make the most of this time to really learn from each other about your DSS version 4 implementations. Well, with that, I would like to thank our panelists very much for coming up on stage and joining us today and sharing their experiences. As I said, we're all here for the next couple of days, so do come and talk to any of us, either from the panel or from the council. And we're looking forward to continuing the conversation with you. So thank you.